Wonderful. Thank you for everyone for joining this session. Loads of people signed up. I think about over 150, and that is not without surprise, as I'm joined today by Martin Thomas, one of the pioneers in the total workforce strategy, in strategic workforce planning, in talent intelligence, and certainly in many of the hundreds of rooms I've had the pleasure of being in over the years with talent acquisition directors. Whenever kind of Martin is speaking about this subject, there's lots of people furiously taking notes as one of the kind of foremost leaders within the space. And as we joked about in the build up, ill-fated of me to not have you on the show until this point. So yeah, glad that we're here today. You're joining us from not so sunny Devon, just before the tourists come down in their droves for the bank holiday weekend, no doubt. But yeah, I think I'd love to get just a bit of an introduction for people that don't know you, your kind of career history, background, and yeah, things that you're kind of passionate about, and then we'll dive into the show.
Well, thank you, Sam, for the build-up. I hope I can live up to your expectations. And yes, I'm in not quite so sunny Devon, which is typical because it's the run-up to the holiday weekend, which I think is the same for colleagues around the world. There don't seem to be many weeks in May where you work all 5 days. So I'm looking forward to the annual migration of the 4x4 as everybody ascends from the south coast. And I very happy to be here. Thank you. Career history. I have been in talent acquisition for most of my career. From university, I joined the armed forces. I joined the British Army, veteran. From that, I went straight into TA on the agency and headhunting side, and then realized I wanted to move in-house. So made that transition onto the in-house. So running TA functions, TA teams globally for companies like Barclays Bank, for AIG Insurance, BT and Telecoms, the BBC. Most recently, Philips, where I ran TA for the lighting business of Philips, which is about a third, which was being floated off as Philips focused on becoming a healthcare technology company. And then I moved back into Royal Philips, as it's called, to head up and create their total workforce strategy. And that's because the business need was to find the right skill and capability to support that transition into healthcare technology. And we had to get that skill from wherever and whenever and through whatever channel it was appropriate to buy it. Now that strategy changed over time, but it was still around looking at your total workforce. And that's what gave me my interest in topics within the TA environment, a bit wider than pure TA leadership and operational delivery. My final job at Philips, I left in summer of last year, and I was running everyone that wasn't a recruiter. So I had talent marketing, recruitment marketing. I had talent intelligence. I had TA operations, TA optimization, we called it, all the systems data reporting process. And I had that total workforce and the overall strategy for TA. So when I left Philips, I wanted to go and work in those areas that I enjoyed and those areas I had a passion for. You always hear the phrase, if you love what you're doing, you're never going to do a day's work in your life. I have set about doing that for myself now, working in strategic workforce planning, in talent intelligence, in the total workforce space, and in the TA transformation space. And lucky enough to be engaged in 3 of the 4 so far since I started back to work in the beginning of this year.
Yeah, this is it. And it was supposed to be a relaxing moment, kind of moved down to a couple of days a week, and it's turned into not that at all. I'm not surprised. And I think from, the point which you really touched on there was around that kind of business case of why moving to this kind of total workforce strategy was imperative to them as they moved from one revenue generating model to another and migrated into the health tech space and the challenges and the opportunities that come with that. And we're certainly at that moment again where most companies globally at an enterprise level are probably looking at the movements right now in terms of AI and technology, thinking, well, how do we equip ourselves for that future? How do we think about that talent? How do we make sure that we are build, buy, borrow, what we need for that next generation? And it's also playing back the role of talent acquisition, where we're often speaking about TA advisors, well, actually, we need to go further than that. And if we want to be able to truly influence and impact organizational strategy, well, yeah, we need to be able to look at how we're contributing from not just the acquisition of talent, but also talent as a whole. And I think it'd be worth going through, I suppose, a thematic journey of how organizations can get there, because I think that was always one of the things which maybe makes it a little bit, it feels ambitious and
Yeah.
something that's far on the horizon. And so where does it all start in your eyes? Like, how do people start that journey from moving from a reactive function all the way through to that kind of transformative function within the org? What's the starting point?
Okay. Well, I mentioned the strategy and understanding what the business is trying to achieve, and also looking back and seeing how that strategy changed completely over time, and therefore how we were able to support them most strategically changed. So if I take that little piece of it for a moment, when we started, Philips was becoming this healthcare technology, so focusing all of its efforts into healthcare, divesting the lighting business, divesting the appliances business, domestic appliances business. So they can invest all of their R&D effort and all of their innovation effort into healthcare technology, starting with a healthy mouth by having a great toothbrush to big MRI machines and digital X-ray machines, etc. To do that changed the skill and capability that they needed within Philips, and they had to look at all sources of skill to get the work done. So it was very much on that skills, capability, sourcing. Where in the world can we find this capability, and have we got all of the channels in place? That's why we looked at total workforce. So we looked at the not just the employee workforce, but the contingent workforce, the freelancers, the partners, the outsourcing. And then we started to look at location strategy, offshoring. How could where could we find the work, and where might we also be able to find the skill, the capability to get the work done at a lower cost. So combining those pieces. Philips had some problems with a recall of one of its products, and it had a massive negative impact on the share price. So very quickly, the strategy became, how can we save cost? That's where then the offshoring became even more important. We've been doing this work in a high cost location. Can we do it in a lower cost location? Where can we take this work? And I'm not talking about one job. I'm talking about a department of 500. There you need the talent intelligence. And that's where that TI expertise comes in, of looking at, and TI always has two views. One is the landscape view, where you're looking at the horizon. What's the labor market look like? And then there's the sharpshooter view, where you're looking at the target, you're looking at a job or role, probably linked to sourcing. We were very much looking at the wider landscape of where is the skill, where is the capability, how much is it going to cost, how available it is, what does the competition look like, and how that can inform the location strategy and transformations within the business. So the business strategy changed. The third change was right at the end of that process: share price down, new CEO, made a promise to the market we were going to reduce headcount by 100. Headcount is a old but simple measure that people in finance understand, that the markets understand, that the analysts understand. I don't understand why you measure headcount. You should measure cost. But because it's simple, people measure headcount. We had to reduce headcount. We had to keep that promise that the CEO made. So we had to reduce headcount. Therefore, the outsourcing became important. How can we get this work done by somebody else, so that we're not counting the headcount, but we're still able to get the skill and capability we needed? So it's back to the strategy of connecting what you do with your workforce to the strategy. And that's why I think I always start with understanding the strategic workforce plan. What is the long-term plan? What are the core skills that you need to deliver, to support and enable that strategy?
And I was gonna say, just on the strategic workforce plan piece then, so like double clicking on that now. So obviously for many organizations, that's just a dream state. To have anything other than we need this rec yesterday feels like something quite distant. And where we do have more structured plans, that degree of flexibility, even in a more mature structure, was pretty high. What do you think is realistic right now when you're speaking to customers, when you're looking within the kind of talent intelligence community, broader communities you're in? What do you think is realistic for companies to be able to aim for? I know it's, how long's a piece of string moment.
Yeah.
It feels like it's changed, right? It feels like the market's changed in terms of how long that horizon view is. But what do you think is realistic for companies to think about?
Key lesson for me, and the most realistic thing for me, is to remember the word strategy is in strategic workforce planning. If you have structure, too much structure, and my key measure of this is you've got an Excel involved in your strategic workforce plan, you're not being strategic. You need to be thinking in whatever the time zone is, and that will depend on your business, both the state of the business, but also the sector that you're in as to what that time zone might be. You think of the development of a drug for a life sciences company, production of a new development of a new MRI machine, compared to perhaps launching a financial product or a resale, a new FMCG product. They might be faster, can be long, can be short. The 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 business lifespan has got to drive your strategic workforce planning. If you can think of the business lifespan, we're going to launch these new products or we're going to create these new services, and it's going to be in this time scale, then you need to plan that you've got the skill, the strategic skill and capability to meet that requirement. And you can only do that at the top level. Anything that then starts talking about individual roles, individual requisitions, you're in operational planning. That's not strategic. You need to do that as well. That's how you manage your delivery. That's how you organize your talent acquisition, how you deliver your internal and your external workforce. But keep that focus on the strategic. It's not an everything workforce plan. It's a strategic workforce plan.
Yeah, that's a very shrewd observation and advice there when you're tying it back to the product cycles in particular. And often when I think about organizations that I've seen that are at kind of that closer point to total workforce strategy and ownership, it tends to be those companies that have that longer cycle deployment, big engineering projects or big defense projects or big, med tech, but absolutely achievable when you think about those kind of shorter windows, shorter cycles as well. And like, and a lot of those examples that you were touching on there is like this kind of changing dynamic, this changing market from one scenario to another. And you were kind of touched on it a little bit with the kind of talent intelligence in terms of that researching, understanding piece. But let's move into kind of when you're thinking about all types of labor. So you mentioned contingent and you mentioned that kind of offshoring piece and how that changed. How are you playing that back to the business when you're thinking about, I suppose, the overall strategy and then being able to pivot? Are these preset scenarios? Are you building these out as the situation's changing? Are the contingency plans in place? What's the kind of setup? How should people think about that?
Well, I think when you think about the total workforce, the number one thing you have to do is understand what do you have today. So getting visibility of your existing workforce. I'm working on a project at the moment for a large multinational where they can tell us how much of the product they sell they have, but they can't tell us the number of workers that they have. Their systems just don't support it. They haven't got the right policies, processes, and culture to have it all captured appropriately. That opens them up to huge risk, a big compliance, and of course, massive cost. Lots of hidden contingent workers coming in under services contracts, paying super inflated rates way beyond the market benchmark. So getting visibility has got to be the start. Then you know what you can have a better idea of what your workforce looks like, how that delivers the skill and capability that the business needs, and how then you're able to influence that with perhaps new channels, often new locations, but also minimize some of that risk. So they have very long tenure contingent workers. The contingent workforce should be a short-term response to the workforce demand. And you pay for that short-terminess. You pay because you've got the agency, because of the sourcing. You pay because you have that agency because they're not your employee. There's someone else says you can stop the work more quickly, especially in certain geographies, than you can stopping an employee. So you pay for flexibility. If you keep that flexibility for too long, then you're just losing that opportunity to have the most efficient workforce that you can. So getting the visibility, I think, is the key first step. What do you have now? What do you have today that allows you to plan for what you might need tomorrow? Maybe there won't be one plan. There'll be that you'll be doing some scenario planning of here are your options. Yeah. Depending on your timescales and your appetite for change.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest steps from the, I suppose, administration of talent into the strategic element of skills delivery, which is that distinction there of moving from I'm being given an option and I'm delivering against that option versus here's the understanding and these are the options available to you. It's like playing that back to the organization. Each one's costed and, it gives you the opportunity to kind of move and flex. And then
Sure.
It would be remiss to not think about the role of AI, but actually detach AI as well. And let's bring in automation and think about that within this within this segment, because when we're thinking about skills and we're thinking about the talent that we have and the roles in which we're doing at the moment, obviously that's having a bit of a shake up, right? There's a lot of roles where there are parts of that role which are maybe now redundant, or maybe entire roles that are redundant as we go through each, kind of revolution or big change. How do you factor that piece in? How should organizations perhaps think about things which can be automated or that kind of tech replacement? So we're not just thinking about people when we're thinking about skills deployment. What's your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
I think the first thing would be start with the work. So what work needs to be done, and don't just do it the way you've always done it. The same applies. I've got an employee leaves. Don't just automatically buy another employee, hire another employee. Think about, can you do it in a slightly different way? What are the workforce drivers behind that work? If it is, if you can identify that there are repetitive tasks, repetitive actions that don't need too much thought behind it, not too much decision making, you could automate it. If you look at, even if it's 10% of 10 people's roles, you could automate that. That's saving you one, which could be used for something else. And obviously, you get multipliers on that. So think about the work first. You have to ask the question around the automation, the AI, to make sure the managers explain. Many of us are experts on this, and all of us are running a little bit scared because we're all learning. And learning is tough for everybody. So at least asking the question and then debating it with the managers, what opportunities do you see for this? That extra pair of eyes can often identify where there might be a solution. I have to say, my long-term view doesn't scare me. Every industrial revolution we've ever been, and agrarian revolution, energy revolution, they've all created more jobs than there were before.
Yeah.
Everybody was running scared of the internet. When I would just walk around with the internet in our pocket, people are unsure about what AI is going to do for us in a couple of years' time. Well, probably ask your kids, and they'll tell you what it can do for you right now. In a couple of years' time, we'll look back and say, how could I possibly have done it without that?
Yes.
Just as I can remember how you did it without a mobile phone and used to fax CVs to hiring managers, or even go around with them printed out on a piece of paper. The world of recruitment is still working.
Yeah, and some things just don't change. Some of the core tenets remain the same. But I love that kind of analogy of breaking down the work. And the piece there was probably comes into that talent advisor role a little bit, and a conversation which we need to have more regularly of being able to have that communication with the manager and asking that question, and it not being an automatic requisition, and being in a position where TA can be in that room and have that conversation, as opposed to, I'm going to take the brief and now I'm going to run and deliver against this role. Yeah, I suppose, how do you enact that cultural shift within an organization to allow the conversation to switch from what's needed for this role to what's needed for the work, and then let me be the advisor to play back what some of those scenarios might be? What would you say is an unlock for that?
Well, I think the TA organization and the broader HR organization need to get much better with data. It's interesting when you go to a presentation, HR brings a PowerPoint, everybody else brings an Excel. Get the data. Even as a recruitment meeting, the preparation for that recruitment meeting, even if you don't have any external data, when was that job last hired in your company? How much internal talent do you have that that could do that job? And is that job attractive to your internal talent? Your existing employees are the best workforce, the best recruitment channel that you have, because they're immediately available to you probably at a lower cost, and certainly are going to be their speed to productivity is going to be much greater. Culturally, they'll be a fit, more likely to be a fit, because they already sit within your organization. So what have you got available internally? Can you post this job internally? Are you able to go and tap people on the shoulder internally? We're making a big cultural change at Philips a couple of years ago, where we realized the only recruiters in Philips who can't headhunt Philips people are Philips recruiters. We had a policy that you couldn't headhunt internally. People were scared of losing their talent. I'm sorry, the talent belongs to Philips. It's Philips who pays their check. And so we changed that. Now, obviously, there are advantages of being an in-house recruiter, because you have access to certain data. You can immediately get hold of people. You've got the email address, you've got the contacts, you can see some of their history in Workday. Exploit that. It's one of your most valuable assets. If you could add external data, market data to that as well, then you can do a comparison of here are a couple of sourcing options that you have. This might be the change in timescale, change in costs, change in talent availability, change in quality, and comparing those between those different channels. And that could be another way of having that conversation around how do we get that work done? If you're thinking it's a job profile, then here are some alternative channels. Perhaps you start then having a location conversation, a footprint conversation. I think that's the rec level. That laser focus on the requisition. I think more often you can bring in the total workforce concepts and the ideas of looking across all of those different sources, all of the ways of getting the work done at an organizational level, at whatever level of organization that is. I've done work where you're moving 5 people. You're still making it offshore. You're still making a significant saving. You're still allowing those people to focus on other value add, or if you're having to lose them, you're saving that cost and you're still getting the work done in a more efficient way by putting it because it's appropriate for it to have been offshored. You can do it with small numbers. You're not talking about thousands of people. You're still adding value, thinking about the workforce at the smallest level of the organization, as well as at the largest divisional company and enterprise level.
And I think the kind of point there as well that I want to double click on is that internal mobility piece, not just in the context of opening up the conversation, but actually really, I suppose, in this point of inflection for talent acquisition, this is where a lot of people are now turning and focusing, thinking, I want to extend my remit and start to focus on this area. But in addition to that, if you were to kind of give a TA leader advice in terms of areas they should prioritize or things, skills, capabilities that they should obtain and think about and play back into the org, what would they be in this kind of changing market? Like, what are some of the other things that people can get hold of? Where's easiest to start? How would you prioritize things if you were walking into a new role in a less mature organization?
I'd like to understand what their position is around that internal mobility. Are they making opportunities available to the existing workforce first? As I said, it's the fastest to effectiveness, least likely to get organ rejection. They're already within your company and they're probably the cheapest. And going out to the external market. So what's your approach to internal? Are you posting jobs? Do you have an effective internal career policy? Do you have effective systems that can capture the skills that the internal workforce have? So that you can look at those skills and see when a new opportunity comes up where you might be able to match them. That can be taken to extremes. I worked at one company where they had a no compulsory redundancy policy. That made it very painful. You had to focus massively on the internal workforce, but it also allowed you to do some really good reskilling of people. You had to focus on skill, not the job. And where could those skills be retrained as that organization also went through massive transformation. So you could get a positive outcome from that as well. So the internal would be one. If you're then looking externally, are you looking at the right channels? To help with that, it links back to, have you got some sort of a view of the future demand? And that could be a forecast. It could be what happened last year. What happened over the last 3 years? What's the trend? Doesn't have to be any more complex than that.
And I think that's a great capture to think about just quickly on that point, because quite often we're thinking about asking the question of the business, and they're also finding it hard in the context of the market to think about what's going to be next and on the horizon and what hiring numbers precisely will look like. Well, the data tells you what it could look like the previous years, aggregated data rather than just 1 year, because especially with the COVID, post-COVID, and then COVID bubble burst, 1 year in isolation is not going to be a good indication. But the sequence is probably fair.
Looking at the trend, overall the trend, absolutely.
And sorry, that was priority 2.
So no, that's quite all right. It's a conversation. So your internal workforce, have you got some sort of forecast so that you can make sure you've got the right channels in place to meet that demand? And that forecast is, are you thinking about the work? So you can think about different channels, different sources, different ways of getting that work done. I would look to understand the footprint of the organization to create those opportunities for offshoring and potentially of outsourcing some of that work when you're looking at bigger parts of the organization. What is the repetitive work? What is the work that doesn't involve necessarily IP? So it's not your core. It's think about what's core and what's non-core. The non-core, if it's repetitive, can it be done offshore? Could it be outsourced? If you're trying to achieve cost savings, try to drive efficiencies, that could be a workforce direction that you take. It might also be that some of that non-core repetitive work is absolutely key to enabling your future, because maybe you're going through a big technology change and you need to make sure that the systems don't fall down. So thinking about that, back to you thinking about the nature of the work.
Yeah, and I think that's, one of the big takeaways for anybody to take that final one there of like thinking about the work that's being done and what the work that you actually need to be done afterwards, and not just replacing like for like, and thinking about those scenarios. How can you break that role down? Could that be spread across other people? Could it be spread across other geos? And then the kind of core and non-core distinction really breeds into that kind of critical talent conversation, which could easily eat up a ton of extra time, but that maybe we don't have for this one. I suppose, where can people find out more, or where can people get more resource, like frameworks, things that they can think about to start that journey? Because for me, it's absolutely imperative that and all the guests I've had on the show and all the people that I speak to, on a weekly basis on some of the projects that we're involved with. What are we talking about right now? We're either talking about rapid acceleration in business units that haven't existed before, or looking at entire business units that are going to need to be reskilled into a completely new environment. And I can only see that accelerating from here. And most of the commentary will tell you that, and history certainly tells you that. So yeah, where do you go to find out stuff? Where can people go to, I suppose, delve in a little bit deeper and think about, okay, like, where's a resource for me to grab this stuff? I obviously know one area which is really close to you, so maybe we start there with the TIC. But then beyond that, where else are you looking at?
So you mentioned TIC, the Talent Intelligence Collective. It's a group of people who are interested in talent intelligence. It's a community of interest, and we work together to highlight and promote new entrants into that market who might solve a problem for members of the community. It's free to join. And publishes a lot in LinkedIn. It also has a Substack which publishes a little bit more detail. Reports and insight. There's a small membership fee for that one, just for the Substack. So the talent intelligence community, you can find it on my LinkedIn profile, would be a good place for market intelligence. There are plenty of other free places to go to find market data. The UN, the World Bank, the Economist's website, many places that offer data on talent availability, educational volumes, so the numbers of engineering graduates are coming out every year in countries, even down to a city level. Lots of data that is available for free. There are, of course, talent intelligence data providers, again, many of them out there, who will be scraping a lot more information and be able to provide that to you, but at a cost. You have to either buy individual reports or have a license to run the reports yourself through those. On the workforce planning side, I'm actually part of the SWP community. Again, get it off my LinkedIn. It's all free, where there's a group of people who were interested in strategic workforce planning a couple of years back, and we published a guidebook or a playbook. It was very simply some of the best practices from 30 different enterprises on different elements of strategic workforce planning. SWP 2.0, we called it 5 years ago. You can get it on, again, it's free. It's on my LinkedIn. We're about to launch an upgraded version. And so bringing it up to date, it should be coming out in the summer of this year. Again, it will come out on LinkedIn.
Are you going for 3.0 or 2.1?
3.0. So that's out there. You mentioned earlier on, AI, it's a great way of sourcing information. And giving you a starter for where you can go. Not only, you could ask AI, where can I find data on this, this, and this? What source of this number of engineering graduates, whatever it might be. And you can ask AI to recommend the channels. You need to play with it. You need to go in and experiment with the AI to see how it can get you the sources that you need. So that and good old internet search continue to be great sources. There is so much out there that's being published because so many people are passionate about it, and they're doing things like the playbook and offering it out there for free. And I think those are wonderful resources for people.
Yeah, 100%. And I think so much great stuff there in terms of that download. And I think the piece that I'd add to that is you touched on, some of the kind of vendor side of the market there, and some of the people that you can get that paid for information from. The thing I'd always challenge organizations to do is you are already paying vendors that maybe aren't specific talent intelligence providers or provide specific workforce strategy guidance, but they will have a ton of data. Your ATS companies will have a ton of data. Your job board providers will have a ton of data. every organization you work with should be capturing good quality data. And can you get them all to capture something that's specific to you and ask them to bring it to your next QBR, and yeah, make something that's really, really relevant to the challenge that you're facing right now, or don't wait that long, and get them to do it before, and continue to leverage those free sources. And then, like you rightly touched on at the end there,
I think it's a really good point.
yeah, yeah,
Really
go.
good point, Sam. Sorry to interrupt, but going to your if you've got an RPO or an MSP, or even if you've got an HRIS or a VMS, they will have that data on all of their customers, and they will be looking at it internally themselves. I've never known one say no when I've asked them to give me a summary or give me some direction, help me solve this problem, help me understand this strategic direction we want to go in. As I say, they've never said no. I think that's a really good ad, actually, going to the suppliers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there's, like you say, so many free resources out there. Then you can get some kind of very specific data to yourselves. Can you pull data from your side? There's other teams within your business that are going to have this data. When you think about competitive analysis, well, your sales team and your marketing teams are going to have that detail. They're going to have that understanding of what is moving in different territories and different geographies, who's going where the competition might change. I think there's just so many sources to pull it from. And then I think the last piece which you touched on there, we've got deep research tools, we've got the advancements in large language models that are able to not just provide the research and provide the information, but start to build those specific templates for you. Take some of the free sources that Martin suggested, compile it with your own data, bring those together. You can get yourself off to a really fast start. And then I think the kind of final piece is then going back and having those informed conversations with the business that are no longer about this requisition or these requisitions. It's about solving the challenge, and how workforce strategy is not just you plus an RPO, it's everything. It encompasses all talent, and you're solving the problem there. And I think the way which you were talking about breaking the work down, whether that's at an individual level or an org-wide level, that's really what people should be thinking about in this era. So yeah, wonderful rundown, wonderful run through. Thank you for joining, Mr. Thomas. We were joined by, for anybody that's a bird watcher, if we could see out of your window, there were seagulls, there were starlings, somebody shot a fortune of chips out there at one stage. If only I was back in Whitstall today, we would have had a gull off. Yeah, absolutely wonderful. You and your menagerie of birds for joining us. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Thanks for hosting and making it easy for me.